Hey everyone, at Alex 2. This is video 2, so we got part 2 from last week. One of the things I was going to talk about with everyone was to go over the drum set a little bit and talk about the different instruments that make up a drum set. Mine's a little bit bigger than some, but we're going to talk about basically like what a 5-piece drum set looks like. That's the most common setup that you see nowadays. And it consists basically of bass drum, which is played on the floor with a foot. I'm going to show all these to you. Also consists of the snare drum. I'll explain what that means when we're talking about a snare drum. The tom-toms, which usually in a 5-piece kit you're going to have like a high tom, a middle tom, a low tom, or floor tom is what they call it. So all of those, when we're talking about 5 pieces, the 5 pieces are going to be your bass drum, your snare drum, and three type of toms. Cymbals vary. Drum sets in general vary. There's multiple ways and multiple sizes of drum sets. Some are very small. Some people will just go out with a bass drum and a snare drum and a set of hi-hats and play that, and that's enough for them. There's other sets. Mine's a little bit larger. But there's all kinds of setups, but the 5-piece setup is what you will most commonly see. So let's talk a little bit about the snare drum. So the snare drum is this one right here, and I'm going to try and get it off the stand for you real quick. But basically we have a top head. I've got a couple little mufflers on there, but that's nothing to worry about. And then we have a bottom head, which is a much thinner, this is what they call the resonant head of the snare drum. And you'll notice these wires that go across the bottom. Those are the snares. These are made of metal. A lot of times they're made from steel. They may be made from other types of metal, aluminum, copper. But basically, or brass, I've even seen. But basically what they do, their purpose on here, they sit on here kind of tight, okay, and they will vibrate against the bottom head or the resonant head, the snare side head. Now these snare side heads I mentioned are very thin, so you don't ever want to play on them. They're only there just to vibrate. All of the playing on the snare drum is going to be on the top head, or the batter head as they call it. Also on the drum, you'll see that there's this right here. Let me get around here so I can hold this a little better. We have, this is called a snare throw off. So what it does, you can see it goes up and down as I move this knob right here, and then this is a little tension wheel right here. But what that does is it changes the sound of the drum. With the snares turned off, you're going to get this kind of sound, which is very similar almost to a djembe or a tom-tom or any of those other drums. But the minute you pull this up, put this back into position, we start to get what you expect to hear out of a snare drum. So what happens is you're playing on the top of the drum, the air will go through the drum and then it will vibrate that bottom head and it will cause those snare wires to react to the playing. And that's how you get a snare sound. Now, as far as the other drums go in this set, one of the ones that I'm probably going to have to move the camera to do this is the bass drum. And the bass drum, like I said, is the one that sits on the floor. So let me bring this around here and I'll show you what it looks like. So if I were to come down here, this is the bass drum down here. And as you can see, it has a foot pedal. So with the foot pedal, literally that's what you do, is you play it with your foot. Okay, and with that drum, that's going to be the lowest pitch of any 5-piece drum set. Now, moving around here for a second really quick, we also have, as I said, if I'm going to cover the 5-piece set, we have the tom-toms. So we have these. That would be your high tom, middle tom, low tom. Over here again, I want to move over here for a second. These are what we call the hi-hat, and they also have a foot pedal. So when I push on that foot pedal, that's going to open and close the cymbals to make a certain sound. And they can be played slightly loose, very tight if I put pressure with my foot, or open and close. So that's just to introduce you to some of the basic parts of the drum set. We also have things that we call crash cymbals, which you've heard, I'm sure, in the past. So a crash cymbal is like this right here. Crash cymbals are what you hear sometimes at the beginning of a piece of music, during the piece of music, oftentimes in drum fills. Another big cymbal that I have over here is what we call the ride cymbal. You hear the ride cymbal, it's very noticeable when you talk about jazz music, which you may or may not have heard much of. But with this, I'll play a pattern here, like a jazz ride pattern. So the different parts of the drum set have different uses and styles of music. Especially like when we're talking about rock or basic beats and things like that, much of what you hear in a song revolves around the bass drum, the snare drum, the hi-hat, or some combination of using the ride cymbal, the hi-hat, the snare drum, and bass drum. And what I mean by that is timekeeping. Okay, so in music, when they count off time, when they count off the quarter note, so like 1, 2, 3, 4, you normally, a lot of the times, you're going to hear a lot of emphasis on the 1 and 3 with the bass drum. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The snare drum is going to be your 2 and 4. So that's when people call a 2 and 4 beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then what's played on the hi-hat or the ride cymbal or anything else is usually kind of like accompaniment to that. So if I were to play just straight quarter notes on the hi-hat along with the same beat, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? You could play 8 notes on the hi-hat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. You could do the same thing on the ride, which right now you can see pretty well in the camera's view. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And there I use the crash cymbal at the end of my phrase. Now, the tom-toms usually get themselves involved in the music when we're playing things that they call drum fills. So that's a drum fill is when we move from keeping time in the music to adding a little bit more. It's almost like an added commentary to the music. I'll show you an example. 1. Okay, so a lot of music you may hear drum fills like that, and like I said, they're added for color. The toms themselves, as far as the pitches go, the high tom, middle tom, low tom sound exactly as you would think. The low tom is going to have the lowest pitch of the tom-tom group. The middle is going to have a middle pitch, and the uppermost tom, the high tom, is going to have the highest pitch. Now, my setup, I have a little bit more. They go into even higher pitches. We don't need to worry about that for now. And most of the time when you hear drum fills, they go from an ascending to a descending, okay? Meaning they're going to go from the highest to the lowest. So, okay, high to low. That's not always the case. Sometimes it's a little bit more involved. Sometimes they go back up. But just know that, like, most of the time with the pitches, that's what you're going to hear. And sometimes there's even things that are involved with playing the bass drum along with the toms. You know, you may have a fill where I might play my right hand and my right foot on the bass drum and do what they call the roll, like we talked about single stroke rolls. You can do things with that too. that just gives it a different sound, another voice, another part of the drum set that we can use. Okay, and the snare drum, of course, gets involved with all this as well. Now that's timekeeping pretty much with rock. With jazz, it's a little bit different. Like I said, you know, the way we keep time a lot of the times is with the ride cymbal and the hi-hat. So if you were to hear a traditional jazz type beat, it might be a little something more like this. Okay, so with jazz, a lot of the times the timekeeping itself is played when the ride cymbal, the hi-hat is playing on the 2 and 4. The way I would count that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. And the hi-hat is playing on 2 and 4. And the snare drum, again, is more like it's accompanying what else is going on. You notice with jazz, I wasn't keeping a straight rhythm like I did with rock, where it was one, you know, that kind of a rhythm. It was more of every once in a while, I throw in a little figure or a little musical idea on the snare drum. So. So it varies a lot more when you're playing something like jazz. With the snare drum, there's other sounds too that you're fully capable of getting out of this drum besides the fact of just playing on the head, you know, whether you're playing single stroke or double stroke, as we mentioned last week. But for multiple bounce rolls, where I'm playing very much and allowing the stick to bounce like that. But you can also do things like playing on the rim, like a rim click. So there's and of course, like I've showed you guys in the past, many of you in the past, about the djembe, how we can change things by playing on different spots of the head or by applying pressure to the head. You can do similar things on the snare drum. If I were to take one stick and kind of put the beat of the stick on the head and play on the stick itself. Okay, there's quite a few sounds I can get there. If I play rim clicks and move the position as well, I also get a whole bunch of different sounds out of the drum itself. So primarily, the main things to think about with drum set are, you know, I would think of it as a 5-piece set, which is the most commonly used and most commonly seen. If you were to go out and buy a drum set or ask for one, you know, for a birthday or a Christmas or whatever, or you were just getting a new set of drums, that's probably what you would start with, is 5-piece. And again, that would be the bass drum, the snare drum, and usually 3 toms. And then the cymbals, normally a set of hi-hats with a pedal is something that's considered part of a basic drum set. Crash cymbal, ride cymbal, and then any of the other cymbals that are added, those are usually like what we would call effect type cymbals. So anyway, I hope that's good. I wanted to make sure I covered the drum set to show you a little bit more about, like, you know, once we get beyond starting to get control of the sticks and knowing how to play on things, just a basic idea of what the instruments are, how they're played, and how they're commonly used in music and different styles of music. So I hope you all enjoyed that, and I hope if you have any questions, you know, you could either let me know one way or another through Miss Beasley, or if you ask Miss Beasley, that'll be fine too. So I hope you guys are all doing well and everybody stays safe. Thank you.